as anybody that's been paying attention since I got here, we have tried to call to the surface many of the things that the Lansing School District has been struggling with, but yet we know we need to do better on to serve our children. When we first started to talk about it, we had three big things. One was COVID, which we sadly have not solved yet, a busing driver shortage and a busing crisis, which we are working towards ameliorating even better, and then special education. I think I've said this numerous times, but it bears repeating. If a school district wants to be seen as successful, as great, as terrific, we should always make sure that we judge that not only for our high flyers, our graduates, the folks that we think of as the services being kind of served, but that we make sure that our most at-risk kids are getting the education they deserve. And one of the at-risk populations that has always been at issue in education is special education. Special education is a important, vastly important piece of education and what a school district needs to focus on. And we have really tried to discuss and surface where we have been, where we are, and where we're going. And today, with this wonderful idea of an ISS, which, is not common around the country, to be able to engage in a discussion with board members, with executive staff, with the superintendent around super important topics, I think this is a real model for the rest of the country. So without further ado, I would like to call up, I guess, to the hot seat, Sergio Keck, the Deputy Superintendent. And what I do want to point out, of course, about the Deputy Superintendent is that Sergio has been kind of in charge of special populations for a while, but this district had included in special populations like refugee, English language learners, but it did not include special education. And so when we reorganized the district, we thought, what a wonderful place to put special education services than underneath the head of special populations, because there is a way that we need to support all of our special populations. And Sergio has done, I think, an incredible job. But I turn it over to him to present. I do apologize that our Director of Special Education, the incredible Eileen Prahota, is here in spirit and digitally. She is represented by that cell phone over there. She will also be Skyping in or Zooming in, whatever the technology is, as well. But I apologize that you will not be able to see her physically. So with that, Sergio, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Hello? Good? Hi. Okay, well, once again, thank you for... Great. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Superintendent, and good evening to all of you. Good to be with you. We're going to give it a shot. This is a hybrid presentation between virtual and face-to-face, and these are the wonderful struggles that all our teachers probably had to go through during this time. So we're going to give it our best. As Eileen is the person that's going to control the slides, and she's hearing through here. So when I say next, if this works, that means that Eileen is going to go to the next slide.
Good evening.
Okay, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Perfect. We have started the right way. As the superintendent mentioned, we're going to try to explain where we were, where we are, and where we're going. This timeline is the whole concept of this presentation. Please, next. So I've been in the school district for over 33 years. And special education has been an area that has truly struggled for a couple of decades. The last time I remember having special education programs that were connected to the community and that were really, people were very proud of it, was with Dr. John Shinsky. And I believe that, I don't know if some of you recall him, but that's about 25 years ago, I believe. So part of the problems that we have identified for our what we saw when we took over in July were some of these areas, but it is so small in there that I'm going to have to arrow one of these. Thank you so much. So one of the things that we encountered was many late and incomplete evaluations. And then we also had the job that there were 2,000 IEPs that were not in the system. We were behind in providing compensatory education. We had a contentious, a poor relationship between the special ed department and the leadership of LSEA and LEA. We have overdue reevaluations. We had corrective action plans. We had high attrition rates of losing employees and staff. We lost the department secretaries. We lost the record clerk. We had resignations. So we have many vacancies in special ed. So this is where we were. Next, please. So we go to July 2021, which is where we are, because this is when the new superintendent took place, came over from New York City to Lansing, and he made it very clear that one of the top priorities was special education. And as he described already, I've had the honor to work with many vulnerable populations. And it made complete sense to add special education under the special populations umbrella. Quite a, must say, big task. Okay, but, one of the things that happened right away was that the superintendent established relationships with the Michigan Department of Education, the special ed department area, and the ISD. And because of that, and Ben's relationship, one of the examples is that the Michigan Department of Education is going to give us 3 staff members to help us complete reevaluations. The relationship that Ben, maybe Superintendent, if you'd like to explain some of the examples of how we're benefiting through this that
Sure.
happened a couple of days ago.
Sure. Oh, well, thanks, Sergio. It's always a little awkward to see that glam picture of me on anything. But yeah, I mean, I think all of you know the way to move a school district forward is to be open, honest, and ask for help if you need it. And so we did something crazy when I got here was we actually reached out to MDE and we said, hey, we know we're not doing such a great job. Why don't we meet with you every 2 weeks and the superintendent of the ISD come to our office? Let's sit down. Let's be honest and transparent about this. And let's just work together. And after building that relationship now for months, the state, thank you, MDE, and thank you, Scott, Dr. Kinishik. Dr. Kinishik, I mean, I'm sorry. Schuldiner is impossible too. I just call him Scott. He calls me Ben, and we're really good about that. They know we're working really hard, and so they're actually sending us three FTE to help support the work. But something else happens when you have these kinds of relationships, and I think what Sergio's alluding to was something that was kind of fascinating. MDE is a bureaucracy. So is the Lansing School District. I make no bones about that. And the school district, because we don't always do what's right or what we are supposed to do, we get investigations, or we get requests for data, or we get forced to kind of do things. And what had happened was last year, they had actually asked for a bunch of information, or earlier this year, they had asked for a bunch of information. And then we get a request for basically the exact same information. Now, when the state asks you for stuff, the typical response is, yes, how may I help you? But when you get these requests, they're really onerous. I mean, you're talking about tens of hours of having to put together documents because they have to fit them. And so because we had these relationships, and it's funny that Sergio brings this up, is that we just said, wait, no, you already asked for it. You've got somebody in the same department but a different unit now asking for this other thing. Hey, no. And what was so wonderful is that they said, oh, you're right. We could just walk across the hallway and get the same data rather than make you do 23 more hours of work. And so it's through, really, I don't want to take the credit, but it's having Sergio and the team really understand that if you build these relationships, you can start to work and put kids forward. We've been able to make even more progress than I thought we were going to do, because a lot of times you have to do this in isolation. So, I mean, thanks, Sergio. It's funny you wanted me to say that, but sure, and it just is, it's a nice indication of if you're just honest and you're open about what makes sense and what doesn't, things usually will, and it's okay to speak truth to power. It's okay to say to the state, look, you asked for the same thing twice. We're not going to give it to you. You could just walk across the hallway and get it. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Thanks. And they did. So, yeah.
That's an example. Great. Next, please, Eileen. So one of the first things that we did in early July, we hired some very special people with a lot of expertise in special education. One of them is Andrew Rabel, which is a former director of special education for the Ingham ISD, that has given us a lot of guidance and support. And then we hire two other people, Beth Dimwick, which is a consultant for 45 years. Her title is systemic consultant. And we also hired Kirsten Myers, which is the Kent ISD Director of Special Education. These two people are working with the district to develop a plan that they're doing a review of the special education department, which this will be revealed. We will have the recommendations in March. That's one of the reasons why we're here today too, because we're getting input from a lot of people, and we also want to get input from you as we prepare to deliver recommendations for the Lansing School District. So before we go to the next slide, I want to make sure I don't forget this, and I want to thank the leadership of the LSEA, Chuck, and the LEA, David, for working with us and collaborating in making sure that we coordinate the services and place people in the appropriate places to be successful. In addition, I want to also thank Ms. Toker for all the data and reports that you provide to the special ed department, to Ms. Corbin for assisting us with hiring people, and to Ms. Jessica for Benavides for helping us find the money to pay for all of this. So the next slide, please. So one of the most beautiful things that have happened in October of 2021 was hiring a special ed director that has a lot of experience in both the area of special education and administration, and also a person that is very caring and a great human being. We're very fortunate to have Ms. Eileen be the director of special education. And this is the cue for Ms. Eileen to take over the presentation.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Sergio. And good evening, President Lawrence, members of the board, Superintendent Schuldiner. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. We are doing a lot of very exciting things in special education. And as Sergio shared, we have a history of maybe not doing everything to the expectation of our families, and that's not acceptable. So we are doing a lot of new things and developing a lot of new practices to help us meet the expectations of the families in our community and provide them with the services that they rightfully deserve. So some of the things that we have put into place since October of 2021 are that a new secretary has been hired for the Office of Special Education for the director. We have also hired a new records clerk for the special education department. The special education supervisors also now have a secretary. We have started to fill very long-standing open positions. For example, we've had an opening at Cumberland for a speech and language pathologist for quite some time. That has been filled. Our resource room teacher positions are filling up. We are actually getting people that are starting to call the HR department, call teachers within the district to say, hey, I heard things are starting to turn around in Lansing. Do you have any openings? And of course, we are directing them to the Lansing School District website so that they can apply for those positions. We have also approved additional hours for staff to bring the district into compliance. So we have several teachers and staff members who are absolutely willing to put in the additional hours to bring us into compliance because they also want what's best for kids. In order to address the issues of late reevaluations and the high number of initial evaluations that we were receiving, we contracted with a company called Presence Learning. Presence Learning does virtual evaluations. The students are actually at the school, but the person who is completing the testing is through the computer. And so we have a proctor who comes in and sits with those students and completes the evaluations with them. So they are making sure the student has the appropriate materials. They're making sure that the person is following the directions, is paying attention to the testing coordinator. And then also part of that was that we hired we are contracting with a testing coordinator who works with all of our schools, who works with our testing TCs and our special education teachers to set up that testing to make sure that it's done with fidelity. Another thing that we did was we hired Amplio Services. Amplio Services are also addressing the compensatory education services, and that is in the area of speech and language. So for speech and language, we had, as I said, several students who were without a speech and language pathologist for quite some time. And in order to be compliant with Michigan Department of Education and our services with students, we have to offer any missed services. So when we had students who didn't have services for quite some time, we now have to make those services up. In order to do that, we hired Amplio Services to address our speech and language needs. All right. So, I'm not sure why this slide is not There we go. Okay. So some other things that we did in order to address compliance and systems is that a system was developed to enter IEPs into Synergy. And that was done with support from the Chief of Staff. Christina Tokar was generous enough to provide us with some additional staff members to make sure that we were getting the support we needed to get these IEPs into the system so that our data is being recorded accurately. Some of the things that we look at for IEPs is when the next IEP is due, when evaluations, reevaluations are due. Of course, the IEPs hold all of the information of services, accommodations, the area of disability. The IEPs really drive our services for students who are in special education. So it was absolutely crucial that we have all of that information in the Synergy system. We put a lot of resources towards our corrective action plan, providing the documentation to demonstrate the processes and procedures that we are developing in order to be in compliance. Those corrective action plans are actually done through a portal system connected to MDE and the ISD. So what happens is they will issue, when they see that we're out of compliance, they will issue what's called a corrective action plan. This could be at a district level or it could be specific to a student. But in all of these situations, we have to provide documentation and demonstrate that we are doing what we need to do to address a deficit. So if it's because the special education department did not have a procedure in place, we need to demonstrate that we've developed that procedure and that we're following that procedure. If it is a corrective action plan related to a late evaluation or reevaluation, we have to demonstrate that we have followed through on that, we have completed that process. If it is a corrective action plan for a student with missed services, that's where we have to demonstrate we have offered the compensatory education and provide evidence that we have completed that compensatory education. So all of this information flows from us to the ISD reviews it and approves it. Once they approve it, they process that to Michigan Department of Education. They review it, and once they approve it, it is closed. One of the things that was really important was to reestablish the relationship with LSCA leadership. Obviously, it's very important that leadership have a good relationship with teachers and staff. So really wanted to open the door to communication. I am always a person that believes in telling me what is needed, how I can improve, what is being shared with the LSEA president as far as what can I do to improve communication? What can I do to support the teachers, the parapros? And that helps me to facilitate how things flow in our district. So one of the things I have done is I've started sending out special education weekly updates so that that communication is in place and people constantly have something to refer back to if they're unsure of a policy, a procedure, or where to look for something. Every Friday morning at 7:30, I meet with representatives from MISD and the Michigan Department of Education. We review the data every week. Every single week, we look at, have all the IEPs been inputted into Synergy? We look at the number of reevaluations that have been completed. We look at the number of initial evaluations that have been completed and are in progress. And then we look at those corrective action plans and look to see if there are any open, and if there are some open, what needs to be done to close them. And then, of course, it has also opened the door to their support. And then if I have questions, if I have concerns, how can they support me in addressing those questions and concerns? We have provided professional development to all of our special education staff, and that includes all of our parapros, it includes all of our teachers, all of our related services, and some of the things that we have been talking about, because we have, during our compliance reviews, we found there was a need in these areas, were transition plans. And we talk about transition plans, this is talking about students when they're going from high school to their post-secondary. So what are they going to do after high school, and how can we help our special education students get to where they need to go? So are they looking at going to college? Are they looking at doing a skilled trade? Where are they wanting to go after high school? So that transition plan is something that is monitored by the state every year, and we found an area of need for us. So we did training on our transition plans. We also, part of the IEP is creating a measurable goal. So every year we revisit the IEP, we look at a student's progress, and we set new goals. And then throughout the year, we measure those goals. Where are we? Are we at a place where we should be at this point in the year? How far are we in meeting that goal? Do we need to tweak anything, do anything differently to get to that goal? One of the other pieces that special education staff are required to do is Medicaid logging. And that is for students who qualify for income-based Medicaid. It is done through our related service providers mostly. And that Medicaid is submitted through the ISD for some reimbursement. And that, of course, helps provide some funding for our special education department so that we can offer social work services and we can offer speech and language through the schools so that it's not an outside service that they have to seek. It is something that we are able to embed in their IEP and offer that as a service in our schools. And then overall, one of the things that we are really targeting is that IEP process. Is it compliant? As I said, we have certain indicators that we have to work towards through the IEP process, certain indicators that MDE and the ISD look at regularly to make sure that we're in compliance. And one of the things is just making sure we are on time. IEPs have to be reviewed every year. And part of that IEP process is making sure it is a team that includes the parent and the family and developing that IEP. So again, just reviewing the IEP process and make sure we're following that with fidelity. Something that I'm excited about that we are in the process of right now is that we are surveying our parents and staff for feedback on our special education department. It is a comprehensive review of all of our staff and our special education parents, which I am very excited about because I think that's going to give us a lot of insight as to where we need to grow and where we need to focus some additional attention. Right. So who we are. When I look at who we are, we have a lot of students that we provide services to in Lansing School District through our special education department. As you can see, we have about 1,856 students currently enrolled in our special education department. So that is a significant percentage of our population. And one of the exciting things about Lansing is that we do offer the entire spectrum of services. And that's not something that can be said for every district in our county. Some districts offer parts of these programs, but not all of them. It is exciting to be a part of a district that sees the entire spectrum from preschool or early childhood up through adult transition. So when we look at some of these services, we do start with our early childhood department, and through our early childhood department, once a student receives an IEP, which can start as early as 3 years old, when we get a referral through the ISD for a student that is anywhere between 3 and 5, they might go into our early childhood department. And in our early childhood department, we might offer things such as walk-in services, which may mean the student just needs speech therapy. So they might just come in once a week, receive speech therapy from our speech and language pathologist, and that's all that is required to meet that student's needs. However, we do have students that might have additional needs, and they may qualify for our early childhood special education program. We offer half-day programs and full-day programs for the early childhood program. And then we also have just started a more inclusive program called ECRP, which is Early Childhood Inclusion with GSRP, meaning it's our universal preschool with some special education supports. And we have a special education teacher consultant who then visits those GSRP classrooms and provides the additional support for our early childhood students. Then probably the biggest part of our special education services is in that K12 programming. Again, we offer the entire spectrum of supports. We have our regular resource rooms. We have specialized resource rooms for autism spectrum disorders, students with hearing impairments, students with visual impairments. We also offer what is known as our program classrooms. These are known as your self-contained program rooms, and these classrooms are much smaller, and our students in our program classrooms will spend the entire day typically in those program classrooms. They are generally not as big of a part as the general education classroom, but will spend their day in that program classroom with a specialized teacher who has a specific credential in that disability area. So those self-contained classrooms in Lansing are emotionally impaired classrooms, cognitively impaired classrooms, and autism spectrum disorders. Not all of our schools have all of these programs. For example, our emotionally impaired programs are at Wexford, Wood Creek, and Eastern and Sexton. I believe our cognitively impaired programs are at Dwight Rich and Sexton. And then our ASD classrooms are at Cumberland, Rio, Riddle, Atwood, Gardner, and Everett. So not every school has all of these programs because they are very specialized, and as I said, require specific credentials to teach in those classrooms. We also have Beekman Center, which is our center-based school. That is for students who have significant disabilities. It is for our severely multiply impaired students. Typically, a lot of these students require specific healthcare needs and additional needs that are just a little bit more intensive. The Beekman Center is unique to the state of Michigan. Actually, it is the only center-based program in the state of Michigan run by a district. All other center-based programs in the state are run through the ISD. So we are definitely unique in that sense. And then, of course, the Beekman program also has the Equine Center attached to it, which offers some therapeutic riding and things like that with special permissions. A student with an IEP is eligible to receive services until the time they graduate or until they are 26. So for our students who are not on a graduation track and they are looking at an adult transition program, those services are offered through Sexton, Beekman, and then we also offer that through the ISD through a program called Project Success. And Project Success coordinates with businesses in the community to offer job training and additional experiences to prepare students for adulthood. Some of the other services that we coordinate with for special education is the Ingham County Youth Center for students who may be going through the judicial system. If a student has an IEP, they are still eligible to receive services, even when they are involved in the judicial system and may not physically be in school. We also coordinate with the ISD with Heartwood. Sometimes we find that Heartwood is able to offer a program that we may not have here. It's very seldom, but occasionally it does happen. And sometimes we work with them also for the Secondary Learning Center. The Secondary Learning Center works with very, very intensive behavioral needs at the high school level. And then for students who have health needs and may be in homebound situations where they are medically unable to attend school, even if a student is medically unable to attend school, if they have an IEP, we are still obligated to offer them their special education services. So we also provide those services. And then something else that we do that is other, it would be our Special Olympics. We have a very involved Special Olympics program here in Lansing that participates throughout the state. We in many activities, sometimes they go up to Traverse City when we're not in a pandemic mode. They would make treks up to Traverse City, compete in state events, and it's a really unique program that we're really proud of. So that is the span of services, like I say, that we provide in Lansing schools for our special education students. Again, it is very comprehensive. It is a true spectrum of supports. And we do this all with the help of our amazing I don't see it here. We have an amazing special education staff. And I apologize that it does not appear that slide is in this staff, but we have a special education staff that consists of 100 resource room and staff members, teachers, instructional staff. We have 101 support staff. That includes our parapros, our one-on-one assistants, and I think technical assistants that support our students with IEPs. We have what are called related services staff, which includes our school psychologists, our testing TCs, our speech and language therapists, our social work teachers, our adaptive physical education teachers. So that team is providing services for the over 1,800 students throughout the district based on what services are identified in their IEP and based on the student's needs. As we say, it's an individualized education plan, so every student is reviewed as an individual. Every student's needs are determined through that IEP team, and they are very specific to what that student's needs are. So some students might have social work and resource room in their IEP. Some students might just have speech. Some students might have speech, social work, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. It's really dependent on what the student's identified needs are. So where do we want to go? So now that we have really, as I said, the support of an amazing superintendent who has made special education one of our top 3 priorities for the district, we are looking at where we are going. The number 1 priority is that all students who have special education needs receive high quality instruction for special education and compliance. The goal is always to be 100% compliant in all areas, which means improved graduation rates, improved academic test scores, improved attendance, improved transition to post-secondary. So we look at all of those indicators, and our goal is that we will be 100% compliant in all of those indicators. Another goal of ours is that we look at our Tier 1 instruction and coordinate our Tier 1 instruction with the special education department to look at the number of special education referrals that we're receiving. So when we have a student in general education and a teacher comes to us and says, or a parent and says, I think the student needs an IEP, or I think they need special education services, we're reviewing what is happening at that Tier 1 level to support that student. Are they receiving interventions? Have they spent any extra time with progress monitoring to see how they're responding to those interventions? What is the outcome of those interventions? Are they making progress? Are they still struggling? What are our next steps, or are we ready to go to a special education evaluation? I think one of the things that we're also looking at, as Sergio said, it's been about 20 years where the department has been struggling. And I think a result of that is we've become separated, and that sometimes we do, or I should say, it is viewed as special education and general education. And we don't want to have that separation. We want it to be inclusive, and we want Lansing to be an inclusive environment for all students, so that students are not looked at as, oh, you're a special education student with an IEP, or, oh, you're a general education student. It should just be, you are a Lansing school district student, and not having those silos. So that's going to take a lot of effort and work on our part, because not only is that's going to mean not just supporting our special education staff, but also supporting general education teachers and making sure that we're working together towards that common goal. The other part of that is developing a valid and reliable data system. So those are things we've started to implement already. As I said, meeting weekly with the ISD and the MDE, and just reviewing our data on a regular basis to look at, make sure we're meeting our benchmarks, make sure that things are being done timely, make sure that we're in compliance, and following up and making sure that people are accountable for what we're responsible for, which is making sure, going back to number 1, making sure we're providing those high quality instruction and special education compliance. And then lastly, we will, as Sergio mentioned, we will be implementing the recommendations from the comprehensive reviews with fidelity. So once that review comes back from our outside consultants, looking at those recommendations, breaking them down, determining what resources need to be put in place so that we can support those things with fidelity and long-term. One of the things that we have really talked about is that many of these things are not a quick fix. They're things where systems and processes have to be put in place. They have to be well thought out, and they have to be long-term. They have to be things so that even 10 years from now, if one person in that plan is not here, that somebody else can step into that position and keep things going. It shouldn't be based on a specific person or one piece of the puzzle not being there. It should be a system where it is long-term. Even when somebody is not there, that system keeps going forward and that piece stays in place. So that is one of the things that we are just really focused on, is making sure that things are done with excellence and fidelity. And that concludes the special education department from my side. Sergio, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Thank you, Eileen. You did an excellent job describing the department and the initiatives. One more thing, we are doing a video tomorrow for all staff to be able to have access to the understanding of free and access to public education and the least restrictive environments for our children. So not only this video is going to be for the staff that are here with us right now, but in the future, as we hire people, they will be able to see this video. As Eileen said, and with all the effort and all the input that the superintendent has put into this project, this is not for 1 year. This is to create something that will be sustainable. And if we can do that, I hope that future presentations would be different. But thank you so much. Now, we'd love to hear your input or your questions. The way this works is that this little cell phone is going to go to the president of the Board of Education. So if anybody has a question, Eileen can hear it.
I will start with Miss Lilji.
Thank you. I'll just give you a little bit of background.
Eileen, can you hear her?
Can you hear me?
I can't.
Maybe I
Let me
gotta
just
talk
bring
into
this
the
phone. Okay. Yep.
I got that.
Somebody's using a lot of minutes tonight.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Ms.
Remember when it used to
Pinota?
be like you had to call after 7
Okay,
or whatever?
great. It's so good. I'm looking at you and I'm realizing you can't look back at me, but
I actually can. John has a camera set up front here.
hi. So special ed is so important to me. Both my parents had their first jobs at Beekman Center, and Mr. Kelly Dean was the adaptive PE teacher while they were teaching there. My dad was with the severely multiply impaired, and my mom has always been with the early childhood special ed. She spent her whole career in special ed. She moved to a neighboring district about halfway through her career, and then my dad later became the art teacher at Dwight Rich. So they didn't stay in Lansing special ed for all that much time. Well, I guess it was like 20 years. They were there for that was a lot. Oh, and Dr. Shinsky was their principal at Beekman while they were working there. So yeah, and then my daughter has autism, so she went into the program here in Lansing, and she doesn't have an IEP anymore. She has a 504, but she did start out with an IEP, and a lot of I credit so much the special ed department here because she's doing so great now. And a lot of people are like, well, you know, the early intervention, she started getting services early on before she was 2. And, you know, I wasn't sure what her life would turn out to be. She was like biting herself and pulling out her hair and, you know, and now we've learned so many ways to, you know, support her and calm her, and she knows how to do that for herself, and she's doing so great. So I have a lot of,
That's fantastic.
yeah, I have so much gratitude. I've come to understand that our family may have gotten some special treatment, maybe, I don't know. We never were behind on our IEPs. We never were lacking for services. But I had heard things. I've heard like rumors over the years about, like, where did the rumor come from that Lansing wasn't allowed to have so many IEPs, or we have too many IEPs and we can't have any more? When my mom had experience in the neighboring district, I remember her staking her career, like getting ready to get fired because she was not willing to deal with budget cuts or staffing cuts because it wasn't safe for her classroom. And I remember her having to like fight that fight. That wasn't here, but you know, and hearing things from teachers and parents, you know, here and there, that things just weren't right. I mean, I'm sorry I'm being so rambly, but I really appreciate that things are being set right now. And I'm like terrified that something's going to go wrong again and we're going to miss it again. Like, I don't understand how we missed this, how I, as a parent before, missed, and you don't know because you just got here, and you don't know because you just got here. But I'm wondering if some of the other people that have been here, like, how did I, as a person who was part of the program on multiple levels, miss that it was so bad? Like, I didn't know there was a corrective action plan in place, and I'm on the board, and I'm a parent, and I didn't know about the attrition rates and the long-standing open positions. So all of that is to say, thank you. And how can we make sure that that doesn't happen again? How can we make sure that we don't miss that again? Thank you for listening.
Yeah, I think just by Superintendent Schulder inviting us here today and allowing us to provide this information is super helpful, just so that there's that open door of communication. I'm so grateful that he invited us so that we could provide this information, because as I said, it is a big part of our population here in Lansing. But I think it's just having that open door of communication. I think having the special education department under Sergio in this special populations and him being part of that executive team, I think is really important. Sergio and I have a lot of dialogue, and we stay connected regularly with updates. I consistently inform him of where we're at, what we're doing. So I think, and then I know he shares that with the superintendent. The superintendent as well has a very open door policy of tell me what you need, we will make it happen. So I think going forward, I see that it is going to be much more transparent and much more communicative. So my guess is that maybe there was a line of communication missing in the past, but since July, that seems to be corrected. We have a very distinct process and a very distinct flow of communication.
So Eileen, I'm going to say something. So thank you. I don't know. You done with the question? So first of all, I think that when you mention how we have to create those systems and structures, so if one person isn't here or things still happen. So when I hear Missy's question, what I think is that, and I guess I'm superintendent, so I can say this, is the way we stop this ever from happening again is that we make sure that special education always has an ISS once a year, and there are specific questions that the team has to answer. So for instance, if we had a once a year, and it should probably be around now, maybe it's December, maybe it's January, and they have to respond to, do we have corrective actions? How many IEPs are we behind? Where are we? That's the kind of data that, I plan to be here for a long time, but, we all have to go, at some time. As far as I know, that's the way the world works. And so if we could create a structure that says every year there's an ISS, there's a presentation, and they have to answer specific questions. That way, whoever's at this board will feel comfortable. And those are the kinds of systems and structures we're trying to put in place so that, and that's not just special ed, right? That would be things like count. That would be things like budget. That would be things like that. So I give you my word that we do this every year while I'm here. We set up those systems, and we'll even give the board some questions we think you should make sure we answer so that you never feel like you're behind again.
Dr. Burrows?
On that point, because I'm always asking about data, thank you very much. That was very helpful and very thorough presentation. I've only been on the board for a few years, but we haven't always had the data that we needed to exercise meaningful oversight. So do we have any outstanding IPs still left right now, and how many, and what's the trajectory, and what are we estimating how long it's going to take us to resolve it?
Sure. So Eileen, you should answer with the real numbers, and then I'll give the kind of overview.
Right, we do have some IEPs that we are still getting caught up on due to some staff shortages. However, as we mentioned in the presentation, we have approved 1,000 hours of overload pay for teachers who are willing to support getting those caught up. The trajectory is that those will be caught up by the February count date, which would be February 2nd, I remember.
Nice.
So it's that count date of February. We're looking to have everything in the system, everything caught up by that next count day.
So soon.
Yeah, and
It's doable when everybody pitches in, and which I'm finding, because there is been a commitment to this department, more people are willing to jump in and provide support.
Yeah, and I want to give a lot of credit to Eileen for that. You've created a department of kind of support and love and camaraderie. And so not only do we see people staying, but it's true. I mean, we're starting to hear people wanting to come back to Lansing or wanting to come to Lansing because of this kind of new world that we're creating. So it's a lot of to you and to a lot of other departments. But to be frank always with you, Dr. Burrows, is we're still behind some. They spent a lot of time making up the stuff that was 2 years, 3 years, even 4 years old. And so starting, August 30th, when the district started, there were a handful that are still in errors, but the percentages are so much lower. The hope is that by first week in February we'll be fully caught up. One place, and Eileen, you can certainly speak to this. One place that I know we're probably going to be behind for a while is the comp ed stuff, the compensatory ed. So many hours were basically not given over the last umpteen years that, even if, all the king's horses and all the king's men came together, it would still take some time. So that's where we're going to probably be always chasing this year. I think we'll finish by the end. But in terms of IEP, initials, annuals, triennials, we should be pretty close in the next month or so. Is that fair, Eileen? You heard that?
Yeah,
Great.
Absolutely. And I'm looking for our IEPs. It looks like we're 90% of the way there. We have about 10% left to go.
Okay, great. So like the kinds of information that I really think we ought to be collecting on a regular basis. What's the average length of time does it take to resolve an IEP? What's the distribution, right? Do we have things that are taking 6 months, a year, how are we doing? The other thing that I really care about, and this has come out in some of our equity work, that we don't necessarily have the data systems to identify by subgroup. And we know from the national research that there's a serious problem with the over-identification of African American and Hispanic youth. And we want to be able to track that. And that's going to be an accountability measure that we need for ourselves moving forward, if we're going to be an effective school district, if we're going to meet our moral obligations and our legal obligations.
That's great. Absolutely. And one request I would actually make to the board is, as Sergio said, this is not only a dialogue, but this is about learning from the board. So, I wrote those down, but, in the next day or so, if there's more questions that you always kind of want to hear, like, we could put this together, because we're going to plan kind of moving forward to give you this information. So
I have one other question, because I always ask these questions. So I saw that there was a survey of parents of staff that are going out. Was that an internally conducted survey? Is that an instrument that came out of our department? Did we pull that from somewhere else?
It was a survey that was sent out from the district.
Okay. And who developed the questions? Is this like an existing survey instrument to solicit feedback, or was this something we created ourselves?
Questions that were developed with the special education department and the consultants that are doing the deep dive review of our department.
Okay.
Based on as they've been digging through the data, as they've been doing interviews, some of the feedback that they've been hearing, and they wanted to try to get a larger scope to try to figure out where, if those issues are specific to a school, or are they more district-wide? So again, trying to get a broader view of our needs, our weaknesses, our strengths, so that they can really target those in their recommendations to the department.
I think that's
Dr.
great.
Burrows,
Yeah,
I'm sorry
please.
to interrupt you, because I know you love this data. But the consultants hire an expert in surveys that helped assist in making sure that they created the correct amount of questions necessary to be able to obtain the data that will be valid and be able to be supported when they report it to us.
Thank you for anticipating what my question was going to be. I would strongly encourage us to make that a regular process, so we can track over time whether we're making improvements. Obviously the survey might, and the feedback we get might have to change a bit from year to year, but having that core kind of feedback from the parents and the staff, we want to see those numbers headed in the right direction over time. And that's another really great accountability measure that's sort of directly from the affected populations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Thank you very
Wait.
much.
Wait till the phone comes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Special education students are very close to all of us. I'm sure about that. There's no question. I hear a lot of things they are doing, the team and the people we hire and all that, but I didn't hear anything about principals and people in the buildings, what they are doing there. How participation are they having in the whole process? And my first question is, what is the process for referral?
In the process for what, I'm sorry?
For referrals. To refer people.
Okay. For a student to be referred to special education, it can be referred by a teacher, by a principal, by a parent. But when a student is referred for special education, the district has 10 days to respond to that request. And during those 10 days, we are required to do a data review. And part of that data review is getting teacher input, parent input, and evaluation data. So looking at things like our NWEA scores, our Ames Web scores, any state testing scores, grades, attendance, behavioral referrals. We look at the whole picture. And then based on that review of data, the school psychologist will will make a recommendation to say, yes, we believe this student may have a disability and we feel like further assessments are needed. Or they may say, we don't feel there is a reason to suspect a disability here, and we're going to recommend some interventions or maybe some other supports to assist the student in addressing your concerns. And at that point, if the student is not recommended for any more assessments, then the evaluation would be closed. If they are recommended for additional assessments, then the team would start processing that testing and pulling the student to do those tests. We have 30 days once a parent provides consent. So after that 10 days, the school psychologist will make their recommendation about if the evaluation needs to go forward. They would request parent consent. Parent would sign or not sign, depending on what they want to do, but they would sign consent, and then from that consent date, the district has 30 school days to complete the evaluation and develop an IEP.
Thank you. And who is, I would like to have the numbers like Dr. Bird said about how many special eds are in every high school and how many are from K to 3, used to be elementary, middle, and high school. Now, I don't know. The division is so complicated. I don't know if it's going to be buildings K to 6 and buildings K to 8. But I like to know, maybe if you have this data, when we are starting to have the majority of referrals. In what grade?
They really, right now, we're seeing them across all grades and all schools. It's been particularly high these last couple of years since the pandemic because of education looking very different. And so we've had actually a lot of parent referrals in the last year and a half or 2 years because of concerns. Maybe parents were working with students at home, felt like they were missing some skills, they were concerned, so we would get a lot of parent referrals. But really, I have to say, we are getting them at every level, kindergarten through high school. Sometimes even in 9th and 10th grade, we're getting referrals for special education, which is unusual. Typically, we don't get a lot of high school referrals, but I would say over the past 2 years, we've gotten them consistently across all grade levels. Our high schools, of course, have the most IEPs because the schools are the biggest. Usually we have about 150 to 200 students at each of the high schools with IEPs. And then, of course, Gardner has our ASD programs. So they have a lot of IEPs at Gardner, White Ridge. They have our cognitively impaired programs. So there's a lot of students with IEPs at White Ridge. And we I can get you the data across each school. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I have the information within Synergy to go and pull the reports for all the schools of how many IEPs at each school.
So Eileen, one thing I think, I'd like to promise this board is they're asking kind of wonderful questions. What we'll do is we'll put the questions down in a list. We'll send it to the board. We'll say, hey, are these the questions you want? And these are the information. If we miss anything, the board will add to it. And then we will create a kind of a data sheet, and that I think not only would be great for the board, but it'll also help us when we're talking about the current state of affairs for us to have that documentation moving forward. So, again, I'm taking notes on what everybody's saying, but I'll send out a document, or Eileen will send out a document, and then just add to it. We'll kind of agree to what we'll provide, and give us a little bit of time, and we'll figure it out. So that's great.
Thank you. I hope this is a yes or no answer. Do we have anybody in the buildings taking care of the special education student besides the teachers? Do we have any special? Do we have somebody that is responsible the organize the IEPs, the IEPs, somebody who is responsible for the teacher, somebody who is there protecting the special education or protecting and helping the special education. Do we have anybody in the building doing that?
We don't have anybody at the specific building level, but we have the 4 supervisors who oversee the different pathways that are responsible for.
Okay, thank you.
sure-
Thank you. I understand, but you don't have anybody in the buildings. Thank you.
Not at the building level.
Thank you very much. I appreciate also the whole presentation. I hope that you sooner or later present to us the evaluation that you are going to have about the special education program in general, a good evaluation that we can have every year. And second, how much money that is going to cost. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And believe me, this board wants to solve this problem that we have, that we are behind as soon as possible. And I don't mind, you hire people, you do things, let's go to put our house in order.
Thank you, I appreciate that support.
I have just a couple of more questions. Ms. Prohoda, our rate of students with IEPs is about 15% of our overall student population. Do you have any idea how that compares to either a statewide average or neighboring districts or other districts in the ISD?
Typically, the goal is to be about 10%. That is a target. We have a couple of districts nearby, I believe East Lansing is about 12%. We are not we're not too far away from our surrounding districts. We're pretty close to the other districts within our county. But a national recommendation, when you read this research, when you read, they usually like to target around 10% of the population as being an average.
Okay, that's very good to know. Thank you. My final question, do you know if we have any outstanding complaints or lawsuits with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights or with any other entities with regard to special ed?
We currently have a state complaint that is being processed, and we currently have a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights that is being processed. It is the complaint through the Office of Civil Rights is being handled through the attorney, but it is not a specific lawsuit. The parent is seeking mediation, so we are looking to mediate that in a way that Lansing can resolve this out of court.
Okay. As a former investigator at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and a current attorney, I think mediation is a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I'm very happy to hear you say that. I think mediation is always results in the best possible outcome in general for both parties. Those are all my questions. Dr. Body. Oh, let me bring you the phone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My first quick thought is just a statement to the folks here. I think that in addition to an ISS once a year, I was going to recommend like quarterly updates, but the real-time update sounds even better. So even if it's something like a Google Doc or something where we have access in real time, or just on the meeting agendas on a regular basis, like just data can be reported. Like we don't need to have a presentation, just like boom, boom, here's the latest numbers, then on to the next topic. The question that I have as a physician who takes care of children is I do often encounter 3, 4, 5-year-olds who are developmentally delayed in one form or another, or who at the very least are speech and language delayed. And I have patients not just from Lansing, but from every surrounding area. So my first question is, do children have to live in the geographical boundaries of the district if they're 3 or 4 years old in order to be able to benefit from the speech therapist services that the district provides?
No, well, they would go through Ingham ISD as a referral process through Build Up Michigan. And Build Up Michigan does the intake with the parent, gets all of the information, and then they take that referral and process it with the district that is the student's home district. If that district does not have an early childhood program, then most often it comes to Lansing.
Got it. So it's not a direct mechanism, it's through the ISD.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, we have to process them through Build Up Michigan. And so, yeah, Build Up Michigan does the intake, and then once that intake is done, they send it to us.
And then if they have Medicaid, you bill their Medicaid for services that are billable?
Yeah, and it's not billed to the specific student's Medicaid. We don't ask for their Medicaid information or their card or anything. It is just, we submit that student information with their student number, and then on the federal side, they look up to see if that student qualifies for Medicaid. If they do, then we are able to bill for that and receive funding to support the student.
What if they don't? What if they
And
have,
we can continue to provide the services anyway.
but you can't bill like their commercial Blue Care Network plan. You can't get funding.
No, we can't do anything like that, no.
All right.
No. It is, but we are still obligated to provide services.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, it looks like there are no other questions from board members. Again, thank you so much for all of your work. We know how heavy this lift is, and we very much appreciate your dedication and your attention to our special ed department. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And like I say, I just love being part of Lansing and Lansing schools. So I appreciate all the support that you are providing to our department.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. Is Sergio still,
Yeah.
Sergio, should I log off?
Yeah, you're good, Eileen. Thank you.
Great job. Bye. Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, the only other thing that we have on our agenda this evening is to talk about a board retreat. I know that we had previously looked at February 19th, which is a Saturday. I hope that no one has made plans for that Saturday. Are people even making plans with Omicron, or is that? Oh,
I don't know, that Monday, I thought the holiday was the one before, but that Monday, there's no school.
no President's Day. I have no life and no plans, so that doesn't have any impact on me, Miss Lilji. That's right.
I serve at the pleasure of the board.
District is life. School district is life. I talked to her briefly, but I'll text her
Yeah.
about it.
Please.
Miss Lilji, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. More information forthcoming. And tentative, because I don't want anybody getting COVID on my watch. So plan tentatively on February 19th. I will hopefully have more information to share imminently. I guess that's it. Yes, Dr. Body.
If you need a Plan B date, please don't do the following weekend because I'm working at Sparrow on the 26th and 27th of February. but I would propose the 12th as the secondary date if the 19th doesn't work, because I don't work that weekend.
Okay.
Oh, bummer.
It's going to be the 19th then.
Scratch that.
That's
19th
even
or
if it has
bust.
to be here
19th
or.
bust.
Okay, great. All right. Any other comments from board members this evening? Comments?
Madam President, I was thinking of sending to you or via email for the retreat. Maybe we are going to have a presentation from the strategic plan people that we selected. And they are having there about 6 different areas that they want to target. I think the board education to be acquainting with these areas, because we are going to develop the strategic plan. We need to know what is going on. Or we had this presentation about these areas during our meetings here, or maybe we dedicate part of the retreat to find out, because that is the most important decision that this board is going to make. And I think we need to know as much as possible about these areas. One of them is, I think, community involvement. The other one, I think, is the student achievement and things so on. So then we had to communicate to the administration what we need if we are going to make a strategic plan about student improvement for student, that we need to know what is going on now. I think then maybe it's to have time to learn about these particular areas. I don't know what you think of what the other
I
board
think that's a
member
great
think.
idea. I'm thinking, do we want them to come make a presentation at the retreat, or do we want them to come make a presentation at an ISS? And I guess that depends on how many other topics we have to cover at the retreat, if we have room in the agenda to fit that in. But you and I can talk about that and talk about other retreat topics and come up with an
Perfect.
appropriate agenda.
And I was thinking, I didn't know about the retreat until today, but I forgot. When you are 80,
To be clear.
when you're 83, you can forget a lot of things. But I was thinking maybe use the IIS or not, also maybe 20 minutes at our regular meetings. They can present that. They will use a combination of both.
Yep.
But the important point is to have a point for us and for the public, that they are going to be interviewed by these people. They are coming to help us to develop the strategic plan. Everybody should know about these 6 areas that they are going to be. And I know because developed 58 pages of that, but we need to let the community and ourselves, all of us, not only the superintendent, everybody, to focus in these areas that we are going to be working hard in the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. Did you have something? Okay. Dr. Body?
Not for the retreat, but sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum from what we covered today. And perhaps this is my fault that I don't already know the answer, but I'm wondering if at some point in time in the future, the superintendent could inform at least me, if not the entire board, about the resources that the school district has for high achieving students. Like, how many advanced placement classes do we offer? How does that compare to neighboring districts or students that are really excelling academically? What do we do to support them to keep them in the district versus what do neighboring districts do? I think that would be valuable for me to know.
Absolutely, as I feel it would be valuable for the entire board. So I love that question. So we'll definitely put something together. We'll talk about when we should share that, but it's a great question.
Okay. With no other business before the board at 7:25, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.